Hey everyone, how you doing? It's 8 o'clock, time for truth bumps this week. Just want to see, there we are. Yep. How you doing? It's 8 o'clock, time for truth bumps. I'm still getting the hang of this, but I'm glad to see that I'm live. Hi everyone, thanks for joining Truth Bumps. I'm happy to be here tonight. This week, I wanted to take some time and share with you some personal stories, some tips, some tricks, and some experiences around psychic abilities. I personally think that let me start with my intention tonight, which is to allow you to maybe become more aware of the different ways that Spirit, God, the universe interacts with us so that we can have a more meaningful relationship with ourselves and the greater good through our psychic abilities. Hi, everyone who's joining. So as I go along tonight, I definitely encourage you to share in the comments any stories or personal experiences that you have had so that we can show each other that we're not alone in these experiences and just maybe, show someone that, hey, I had that experience too, and I didn't even think that that's what was going on, but it is. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the difference between debunking something and disbelieving something. I'm all for debunking. I would like to know if there's a practical reason for a sensation, a noise, a voice, or an experience. And I go and I do as much debunking as I possibly can. Then there's disbelieving, where you hear something, you immediately say, oh, that was nothing, right? Without even looking or considering or taking a moment and being present with the sensations. The problem with that is that when we deny what our experiences are, we are like really making it difficult to get any messages that are there for us. And we're making it very difficult to actually grow and develop our gifts. So when we disbelieve, it's almost like an instant to turn the light off in the room and forget that it's ever there. And that can not only be frustrating for the loved ones that are trying to get through us, but also our guides who are trying to tell us some information that we need to know in the moment. So we've got so many that are joining. Hi, everyone. Hi, Jen. Hi, Nida. Hi, Ronald. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm so glad to have you here. Feel free to share your questions and your personal stories as we go along tonight. I'd really love for this to be a collaborative joint venture in our experiences. So we were talking about debunking versus disbelieving and how we absolutely want to take all the time in the world to debunk. But what we don't want to do is disbelieve things we can't explain. We want to open ourselves up to the possibility that, hey, there might actually be something going on here that I need to take a little bit more time and sit with for a little bit. So here is a little bit of background about me. I am a psychic medium. I am a graduate of Scotty Rorik's under the Psychics Unite certification for psychic mediums. And I had been having experiences my entire life, but I had just shrugged it off. I'm imagining that's a big one. That's just my imagination. For a long time, I would maybe acknowledge something would happen, but I wouldn't care to go deeper with it because I wasn't experienced enough to know what I could do with that. So there was a time decades ago where I was really starting to get interested in things like meditation and psychic abilities. I really wanted to meet my guides at the time. I was very interested in starting having conversations with my guides and getting more impressions with them. This would have been a couple years before my daughter was born. She's now going to be 18 in a few months. So that gives you an indication on how long ago this was. I remember one experience that I had that I absolutely could not discredit, that really opened my eyes up to, wow, there's some valid truth into the fact that there's another side, and people we love can try and reach us here. As an infant, Ava wouldn't necessarily sleep in her crib. A lot of infants love to be coddled and swaddled. And she wouldn't lay stretched out in her crib. So one of the ways that we got around that is in the early mornings, we might put her in her car seat and just rock her beside us while we were in bed for an hour. And I remember my husband at the time, her father, was looking over me. I was leaned over, looking over at Ava and just making googly eyes and all the nice little things that you do for your baby and all the funny little sounds that you make, just in awe that this 2-month-old being has entered our lives and blessed us with the care of hers. And I thought my husband was leaning right over me. He was out of my sight, but I could feel his presence there. And he even said something, and I continued knowing that my husband was there because I could still feel him, right? Continued to play with my Ava, and all of a sudden I saw a hand come around me and just do like one of those little things that you do to a baby, like, hi little baby. And I remember it looking kind of golden, and I thought, that's it's kind of weird, but I didn't think much of it anyway because I knew that it was my husband. And literally in that same second, I heard my husband in the other room getting into the shower. So I know who it was now that was with me, admiring this soul being, this soul family member of mine who had come into our lives. But at the time, I was just like, I really had to take a moment and think about that, because I knew what I was seeing and I knew what I was feeling. And it was totally like I couldn't debunk it, because it was just the three of us in the house at the time. And obviously there was nothing but love and support filling there. But had I decided that, oh, that's impossible, that had to have been my husband, there's no way that could have been anything other than my husband, who was 50 feet away in a different room. I never would have been able to have the experience of knowing that my past loved ones are still with me, and knowing that they are still supporting me and loving the people that are in my family, because we do travel in soul groups. So around the same time, I worked second shift at a pharmaceutical company, and they didn't always keep me busy in the evenings. So it would often end up that I would finish my work in the first 3 hours of my shift, and with no one around to really guide me on what else to do. I'm doing my best to keep busy, but there were a couple nights where I thought, you know what, it's quiet. I've got break time. Let me just try some automatic writing. I had heard about automatic writing, and I wanted to try this. So there's a couple ways that you can do automatic writing. The way that I had tried it at the time is I held a lead pencil in my hand very lightly, almost like, I don't know, like it just very lightly, like it could fall out if you shook it too hard. And I had my paper here, and I had touched the lead tip to the paper. And while the paper and the pencil are connecting, I'm closing my eyes and I'm doing like a little meditation, right? I'm taking a deep breath. I'm getting grounded and centered into my space. And I am now just, setting the intention with love and protection of the highest good to say, hey, is there anyone out there who would like to talk to me? This is actually almost the same intention with you could do the same with a pendulum. You can also do the same with a spirit board. There's some measures that I would take just to make sure that it's contained in a spirit of love and support. But this is the basic premise. So I would ask, is there anyone here who would like to talk to me? And I could feel the pencil moving, but I couldn't. It was moving so micro and almost like a scribble, right? It felt like little scribbles that I couldn't even make out. And I would open my eyes and acknowledge that it was definitely a Y for yes. I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's go back in. And then I would ask yes or no questions. Are you a spirit guide? And it would say no. Because at the time, what I thought spirit guides were, I've come to know differently. But, and I would keep asking yes or no questions. Now, I would ask then, are you a relative that have passed on? And got another yes. And so I'm like, are you a grandmother? Because the only loved ones I had lost by that time are my grandparents on both sides. And so I'm like, are you a grandmother? And it said yes. Now, here's the other thing that just kind of like, whoa. My paternal grandmother is the one that I knew the best. I had the most time with her here in this lifetime. I wouldn't say that we were traditionally close. Obviously, I loved her very much. But she was still around. I think she passed away around the time I was 19 or 20. My maternal grandmother passed away when I was younger. I was about 7 or 8, I think. And I remember having closer memories with her, but they were so far removed, they weren't the ones that would immediately come to mind. So she was the one that one time I came home with a Raggedy Ann doll that someone on the playground had fought me for. It was my doll. I brought it to school, and it was one of 3 that I absolutely loved. But we had a tug of war argument over it, and they ripped her head right off. I was so upset. And Grandma at the time, Grandma Wanda, was the only one at home when I got home, just sobbing, these 2 pieces of tall baby in my hand. And she immediately scooped that doll up and said, don't you worry about it, baby. We're going to do a little operation. She's going to be just fine. You let Grandma take it. And we're going to do a little surgery. And sure enough, within an hour, she had done this exquisite work to sew the head back on. And I thought she was just as good as new. It was just like pure magic. Barb, I don't doubt it, because I feel my grandmother here as I'm talking about her. And in fact, as I'm doing this, I'm getting the truth bumps. So I'm going to have to go back through and see if I can catch it, but I definitely feel her. Another thing that Grandma used to do when we were little kids is she grew up and thrived in the Depression era, well, as much as anyone could, right? So one thing that was really common back then is you collected buttons off of discarded shirts. Buttons were a very hard commodity. They were very expensive. It was really wasteful that if there was a shirt that you could no longer mend or repair, to toss it out with the buttons on it. And I should have brought the jars up. I didn't even think about that to show you guys, but Grandma had mason jars, little jelly jars that she kept her buttons in. And she's got, one for the all white buttons and one for the different colored buttons, so that anytime she had to do a mending or a repair, she could take the buttons that matched the best and add them to the garment. Well, for fun, when you're a kid, everything's fun. One of the things that we would do to pass the time is we would actually take needle and thread, because she was an excellent seamstress. Take some needle and thread and actually thread the buttons on there and make little temporary necklaces. And of course we couldn't keep them, right? We had to put the buttons back in the jelly jar after we were done, but we would just sit there and thread these little buttons onto a string. Yeah, Nida, yeah, absolutely. I hear you. I actually just in a dollar store a few days ago saw random buttons that you could buy in a little jar, and just out of respect for my grandmother was like, oh, I got to get that. I've never seen that before. So I had asked, back to the automatic writing, I had asked, are you a grandmother? And I got yes. And I'm like, which grandmother are you? And this time I didn't want to ask a yes or no question because I'm kind of probing for a little validation, right? I'm still very early into my experiences, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about what's coming through. And so with my eyes closed, the pencil was going in scribbles, and I don't even begin to understand what it's doing because I can't with my eyes closed. I'm just concentrating on being an open channel and fully expecting that my grandma Catherine, who I had known better, had known longer, would be the one to come through. Out of the two, I just felt closer with her at the time. So then when I open my eyes and I clearly see the word button, I was shocked. I stared at it for a good 60 seconds, and I just couldn't believe it. And the moment I understood who I was talking to, I was awash with so much love and gratitude. And I understood then, oh my God, my grandma Wanda is here and she's talking to me. And the magnitude of that is insane to me. So had I not gone and had the experience of asking the right questions, of remaining open and being aware and acknowledging what's actually coming through for me, I never would have had that experience to understand Wanda's looking out for me. Wanda's here for me. And later I've come to now find out that she's always been a guide for me, because we can have past loved ones who continue to look over for us and do things for us on the other side. And she's proof of that. So it's one of those things where I couldn't pretend that it was my imagination. I knew what I was seeing. I know I can't prove this to anyone, but I knew I was being honest with myself when I had no idea what message was coming through, and buttons was the last thing for me to ever consider. So after that, when I would get home from second shift, I would want to, relax for a couple hours before going to bed. My husband at the time is a school teacher. And so he went to bed right around the time I got home, or just an hour before. And so I had some time to myself in the evening. In the house that we lived in at the time, the living room had an open plan into the kitchen. So where my furniture was sitting, where I would watch TV, I could totally see out of the peripheral view of my eye into the dark kitchen. And I am a notorious scary movie fan. Now, I'm not one of those that gets spooked easy. I've grown up with two brothers, and it's very rare that you'll actually catch me off guard and scare me, because that's all they did. So after a while, you just get used to things flying at you. So it's not like I was watching movies and then spooking myself. But I would notice that as I was sitting there watching the TV, I could see movement out of the corner of my eye in the kitchen. And we had an island in the kitchen, and the movement was always behind the island. And sometimes it would go from the refrigerator to the sink. And sometimes it would just come around the corner a little bit, but it never really left the kitchen. Now, That was one of those things that I thought, I'm imagining this. I never took the time to sit there and, and take a moment to try and figure out what I was experiencing or what there could be happening. I just thought, Devin, you're losing it. I wasn't scared. I thought it was interesting, but that was one of those things where I thought, oh, that's just the cat, when it wasn't. And later come to find out, I know now who it was. My grandma, Wanda, actually likes to hang out in the kitchen, and still sometimes to this day, I'll see her shadow in the kitchen, and that's just where she likes to hang out. So that was a missed opportunity for me because I didn't take the time to acknowledge what I was seeing over and over and over again. I mean, if you see it once and you don't see it again, I would still argue that you should you should do some investigating within yourself. And we'll go on and talk about what we can do in those moments in a minute. But especially if you start seeing something repeatedly, there's more to it. You really owe yourself to dig deeper. So there was another time, same scenario. I'm home from work. It's late at night. I'm watching a scary movie on the TV. And it must have been around the time we had just celebrated our birthday, because I had some helium mylar balloons, you know how they float around for the next couple of days. And there were a few in the kitchen. And I'm watching this movie and I'm seeing movement out of the corner of my eye like I do a lot of the times. But when I turn, I notice, oh God, it's this balloon. This balloon is moving so slightly up and down. And I'm like, God, that's really weird. But it could be a vent. Maybe it's something, a draft. I don't know. And I just pay attention to it. And then all of a sudden it starts moving across. Now this is behind the island. So it's on the other side of the island. I can't fully see it. I just see that it's moving and deliberately bouncing up and down. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm seeing this. I can't believe I'm actually seeing this. This is too much for me to believe. And it's just going, and it's going, and it's going. And finally, it gets to the end of this island, and it makes the turn. And I'm going, what the hell is going on? I am watching this balloon intelligently move on its own, and I don't know what to do right now. And it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it comes right into view, and it's my cat Milo. It's my cat Milo. It was the daffiest kitty that I love so much. But he had grabbed the tail of this balloon and was just parading around the kitchen with it like a dog with a bone. And that was the one time that it was actually the cat. He was such a sweet, sweet boy. And I still to this day, obviously, get a real kick out of that story because, you know, if you're looking to debunk versus disbelieve, there's always going to be an obvious reason if it's obvious. And then if it's not, just working through and believing what you're experiencing. Now, since Milo passed in 2016, he often comes around as a little shadow. And there are sometimes he is so strong that I'll be walking and he'll be at my feet. I almost trip over his shadow. But it's just another signal to me that he's still around and still loves me and still watching over me. And so I want to share what I think, especially for empaths. Do we have any empaths out there? I am a huge empath. Let me see all my empaths. But the biggest thing that we can do to really kill our trust and belief in ourselves, especially as empaths, is disbelieving what we're feeling. Or, worse yet, believing everything that we're feeling is ours. And I say that with a little bit of reverence because earlier this year, I really started to, with Scotty's help, work on understanding what my energy is versus others, and understanding just the very large percentage of feelings that I am undertaking that are not my own. I see you, Jen. Yep, I know that. This should resonate with any empath, and I suspect there are empaths out there that may not know that they're empaths, and so I particularly ask that you sit with this and see if it resonates, because there are ways that we can get around this. But yeah, I see you too, Donna. Absolutely. I think a lot of us are. So when you're like, I had always known what an empath is. I'd always heard about empaths. Empaths feel other people's feelings. Great. And I had always been told that I was an empath. I knew that I was very empathic. I could have very strong empathy for anyone. And I'd always been like that, even as a kid. Absolutely, Barb. I hear you. And yep, Sharon, I see it too. That's right. I thought when you're an empath and you're feeling someone else's feelings, you have an indication of where it's coming from. I had no clue how 100% someone else's feelings can feel like yours. Now, you may not understand why you're feeling it. You just know that you're feeling it. And for me, especially anger, I was very quick to pick up on people's aggravations, irritations, and anger. And when I really started doing this work, I was absolutely shocked at how a trip to the grocery store can be so crazy, can be so overwhelming. And this was actually during earlier this year, right? So this was really when we were all, like, we've all been struggling with COVID and the stay home stuff. But when essential employees were the only ones really in the offices, I'd walk in and immediately I would start feeling resentment from the people that were working in the grocery store. Why do I have to be here? Why? And I would start to feel like, why do I have to be here? Why do I need groceries? Why do I have to be the one to do the grocery shopping? Now, mind you, seconds before, in my car, pulling into the parking spot, I'm singing. I'm happy. I'm grateful. I'm singing. The moment I get out of the car, the emotions just started to hit me. And then I would start feeling the judgments of the people who shop there, how inconsiderate people were being, how they expected and demanded more. They didn't like the changes that were happening amongst this pandemic. And I'm feeling all of this, but I'm feeling it like as if it's mine. And it took a long time for me to be able to stop and pause and understand, wow, I don't know where this feeling has come from. And I really need to do a better job at knowing when it's not mine and letting it go and protecting myself. So I think one of the biggest ways that we can disbelieve in our powers and our abilities, especially as empaths, is shrugging off the moods that we get in, especially empaths, because we really need to be on top of knowing what we're feeling, when we're feeling, and why we're feeling it, because we've come here to do such fantastic work with our empathic skills. But bless the ones that are still coming to terms with managing it or coming to terms with what they're experiencing, because it is a very frustrating time. I could go on forever about that. So if there are any empaths out there that have some questions, if some of this resonates with you and you want to learn more, highly encourage you to consider our Psychics Unite meeting on Monday nights, and I'll give the details on that at the end of the show. Okay. So one of the things that that was the moment I needed water. One of the things that I feel like are common everyday things that a lot of us experience that are really psychic. And if any of these, like, if you experience any of these, let me know in the comments, because I'd love to know and see just how many of these who might have the same things happening to them. So share your experiences in the chat. Let's see how many of us are out there. So it's the thing that I like to call, where'd that call come from? You'll be sitting doing your everyday job, maybe doing the dishes, just business as usual. And then all of a sudden, your dad pops into your head, or your auntie, or your best friend, or, you know, that coworker. And within 5 minutes, they're calling you. Another version of this is that you might think of someone one day, you might think of them again out of the blue the next, and then shortly after that, they're calling you. Like, I've been meaning to call you, but I just kept getting busy. That is definitely a psychic connection. It's not a coincidence. I don't really believe in coincidences. I think things happen at a specific time for a reason. And if you're getting the impression of someone, and that's the moment that they start to text you or call you, or maybe you get a letter in the mail that day or an email, that was your psychic ability saying, heads up, this person is actually trying to reach you. This also works with passed on loved ones. If you're sitting there and you're watching TV and all of a sudden your great Aunt Barbara pops into your head and you're like, wow, I haven't thought of her in years. She's saying hi. She might be saying more. But most of the time we like to say, wow, that's weird, and then go on about our day, and we don't give it any thought or spend any time with it to get any messages. So whether they're passed on or they're living, if you're just getting an impression of someone out of the blue, they're trying to talk to you, or in some way, or they're thinking about you. Let's see. So similar to that is when random thoughts pop into our head. So again, we're just folding laundry, right? And all of a sudden, you get the thought that you need to get movie tickets. I don't know what movie. I don't know where that came from. I had no plans to see a movie. I feel that's strange. And then within the hour, your partner or your friend comes into the room, or they call and they say, hey, I wanted to go see a movie with you. We should go get movie tickets. These are not coincidences. I'll take that one even a step further. And this is one of the things that tripped me up when coming into my psychic abilities. And really, I'd always been in my psychic abilities. I just wasn't believing in them. Those random thoughts sometimes aren't suggestions. Sometimes they're full sentences. And so I would be sitting there folding the laundry, and something like, I never should have been caught, goes through my head. Where did that come from? I didn't know at the time that is probably a ghost. That's probably a ghost that was trying to get my attention to tell me their story. Or sometimes when we have a thought that we can't explain, that we don't like, especially if it's supercharged, if it just doesn't jive with anything that you've been thinking, doing, that is someone around you in your field that's trying to reach out. Scotty, thank you. I just thought that I was imagining these things. I clearly thought they were just the cat running in my head, knocking things off my shelves, and making random noises. I also thought that I was like, wow, I'm just a really good character writer. Like, I've got all these characters coming forward. I should write a book, but I could never force myself to write a book because that's not actually what was happening, and that's not what I was meant to do. It was these other spirits trying to come to me and talk to me. So definitely let me know if anyone has that experience, if they have any random thoughts that come through. Yes, Jen, absolutely. Sometimes these thoughts come through in my voice or in my mind's voice. It's not exactly mine. Sometimes they come in a much deeper voice. Either way, whether it's a loved one or a spirit or a ghost, sometimes the voice will match what they want it to. And that's even more validation that it's not just, your mind running with it. Another everyday coincidence, another everyday happening that I think a lot of us take for granted are repeating numbers and patterns. I cannot tell you how many times in one day I will see 44 or 444 throughout 12 hours. Like, it's insane. I see it on license plates. I see it every time I look at the clock. It's 7:44 or it's 4:44. I go to pause a movie and it's 44 minutes left. Just random. It's not random. What it appears to be random repeating numbers, but are actually signs and symbols or messages from our guides. I believe that these are moments that our guides are trying to say two things. Either one, pay attention in this moment, either to what you're feeling, what's going on around you. Just tune in for a moment and be present. And we're here and we love you and you're doing a great job. We need you to know that we're here and we love you and you're doing a great job. Because I also think too many times we are just really living our life purpose exactly the way that we want it to. And we're being super critical on ourselves. And I know that a lot of our guides are like, please be easy because you're doing amazing. So I think anyone who's listening to this, either right now or in the future, please be easy because you're doing amazing. Where's that? Oh, very cool. That's so wonderful, Jen. That's awesome. I know sometimes I see 1212, sometimes I see 1111, and those are all beautiful spiritual numbers, 3333. But for whatever reason, the repeating fours are a big one for me. And I think it's just because my guides are like, well, that's the one that she recognizes the most. So let's just blast her with it. They're looking for anything that will grab our attention. So other patterns that I've noticed are birds. And one day I'll see 7 hawks. If I'm out driving, I'll see a lot of hawks. And then, or cardinals. Cardinals we'll see a lot of. Crows. But feathers, you can see feathers in random places. Like, you don't know how the feather got on your living room floor, but there it is. It's not an accident. It's one of your guides or your loved ones who have given you a little gift there. Coins, buttons, repeating colors, anything that repeats more than 2 times. I'm such a believer that I think if it repeats twice, I'm like, well, that was for me. I was supposed to see it. But if you want to give it another chance, take a moment and see how many times the color blue repeats for you in one day. These are all things that I think we experience on a daily basis, but we're just like, oh, wow, that's really funny. And then we go on about it. So I think another experience that we have is any of us animal lovers. Do I have any animal lovers out there? If you're an animal lover like I am, you really like to you can't help but to sit in the animal's field and just love and appreciate them for everything that they are, right? So a dog comes to me, a cat comes to me, and every one of them is completely individual, and I love them. And then all of a sudden, just like we were talking before, you're locking in with that animal, you're giving them pets and loves, and then you just get a thought about that animal. So, for example, years ago, I had rescued 2 cats, and I like to spend some time. They always give the names to animals that you're supposed to adopt, but I like to spend time with the animal and find out what their name is. And one cat that I had rescued was all white, and they had named him Casper, and I hated the name. I'm like, no offense to Casper, I just don't like the name. And I sat with him for a couple days. He was so loving and affectionate. He was actually this one kitten in a cage full of 10 kittens. And all of these kittens were playing and jumping and stepping on each other's heads. And here's Casper just laying in the middle of the cage, zonked out. And I was like, that's the cat for me. So I spent a couple days with Casper trying to figure out what his name is, actually. And all of a sudden it just came to me, Spectre. That's my cat's name. That's what his name is, a Spectre. And he was a true blue specter. He would be in one area and you would just blink, and then all of a sudden he's over there, and you had no idea how he would disappear and reappear. Shortly after that, I adopted Milo. Milo was a completely all black cat. Beautiful, the one that I spoke about earlier. I love black kitties. And I actually didn't like the name Milo. I'm like, God, again, I hate that name. So I spent a couple days with him, and I got to know him, and then, waited for him to tell me his name, but he confirmed he was a Milo. And I'm like, oh, he's a Milo. I can't argue with that. My one pet that I have now, her name is Lily. She's a dog. I think some of you have seen her. She talks to me sometimes too. When we first adopted her, she was just a puppy, and she was, learning all of the rules. We were trying to potty train. You can't chew on that. You can't chew on us, that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden I just saw her flop over, and I just heard, I'm doing the best I can. It's just, there's a lot more rules here than where I came from, and where she had come from was a farm. And I understood that was her talking to me. That wasn't something that I had made up. I'm not so special that these messages are coming from me, right? They're coming from other sources. And I feel like it's such a gift. So whether it's a ghost, whether it's a spirit, which is a loved one or a guide that's passed on and transcended, versus a ghost that is transcended or passed on but has stayed here on earth, or whether it's an animal or a living being that you're picking up on, like souls communicate all the same way. So you can be getting impressions from animals too. And then how many of us have complained about always waking up between 2 and 4 in the morning? Either just on this side or this side of 3 a.m. We're always waking up. I don't think, again, that's not a coincidence. I think there's times in the night when we have little resistance, like we've basically released all of our resistance from the day, that our guides or other ones are trying to reach us in the dream hours of our sleep. And sometimes we'll wake up in that magic moment of 3 a.m. If any of you have some experiences that you have had that just popped in during your day-to-day activities, I'd love to hear about them. Those have been some of mine and some of the ones that I've heard others have. I wanted to touch just briefly, because I think it's important to know. I had been psychic for over 20 years. Well, my life. I had been psychic for 40 years before I knew for sure that I was psychic or that I was giving it that term, because I didn't understand what it was like to talk to spirits, ghosts, animals. I just understood that I was getting some messages, or sometimes I was just getting random thoughts. And so talking to spirits can be very much like I'm talking here with you guys. You ask a question, you'll get an answer. That's the answer. I had no idea that it was that simple and that straightforward. It doesn't always have to be like lit candles and seance. It's just you take a moment, you ground yourself, you be present in the moment, and you ask a question, you get an answer. Oh, excuse me. So don't take for granted, or don't think that you're not talking to other spirits when you possibly could be. And I think I'll go more into that in another show, but know that it can really be that simple. And then the last example that I had a lot of examples here. I was thinking I wasn't going to have enough. The last example that I have is what I call channel journaling. And I didn't even know that I was doing it, but I would just start journaling, and all of a sudden I would lose track on what I was writing. And I would look down and there would be some very important information there, either some epiphany or encouragement or something that I thought was coming out of me that I hadn't been aware of, when really it was a message, again, from my guides through this channel journaling. So we'll go into a little bit more about that in just a minute, because that's actually one of the exercises I'm going to recommend if anyone is interested in really practicing with their intuition and their psychic abilities. So the next time that you experience something like this, what do you do? The next time you see 111 or 2 cardinals within an hour, or the next time a random thought comes into your head, a random air quote thought, take a moment and pause. The best thing that you can do is pause. And I lied. The best thing you can do is acknowledge it for what it is. Oh, I'm getting this message. It's not a coincidence. This is meant for me for whatever the reason. I'm going to take a moment and pause and sit with this. Now, I think sometimes, especially as Americans, and especially during all of the things that we're going through right now, it's hard for us to sit with some things. But if you can, and it may take some practice, be kind and patient with yourself. That's okay too. Try and sit with it. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And just try and quiet your mind. I already hear some of you, Devin, there's no way I can quiet my mind. This is impossible. It will take some practice. And in 2 weeks, I will not miss it again. It feels so good to be back tonight. But in 2 weeks, I will do a full hour of, I'm going to be combining some weeks on meditation. So we'll go through meditation tips and tricks that will help us with this and help us just kind of center our mind, even if just for a few minutes. And we'll even do at least one guided meditation too, if we've got time. But when you get some of these messages, acknowledge it. I acknowledge you. I hear you. What are you trying to tell me? Sit with that question, and honestly, the first thing that comes to your mind is the answer. I don't care if that first thing that comes to mind is a chili recipe. That's the answer. That's what they're trying to tell you. Take it for face value that this is the answer. Now, a lot of times, especially when I was just beginning, that answer for me would be, I love you. And I think a lot of times, because the The other plane, the astral plane, or I call it the meadow realms, where we go when we transcend heaven, if you prefer nirvana. I know I love chili too. I always write. I mean, I sometimes spirits give me a recipe. So anyway, they are on a different plane than us. They operate out of pure love. Everything they do is pure love. I'm talking about spirits on the other side. Ghosts that are earthbound are a little bit different. Actually, they're quite different. We'll go into that in another show. But just understand that when you're talking to your loved ones and your guides, it will be out of love. They always have your highest and greatest good intended for you. That's a great way to put it. Yep. That's a great way to put it. So a lot of times those original messages would just be, I love you. They just want to know that they're there and that they're giving you love and encouragement. And then with practice, the messages will start to grow and develop a little bit. And they'll get a little bit more, I'm going to go with chili again, meaty. They'll get a little bit more filled out. So yeah, the first thing to do really is to acknowledge, and even out loud, looking upward and just saying, I acknowledge you. Thank you. When you start to do that, the moment you start acknowledging that you're getting these impressions, sensations, messages, you'll get more. They'll just start coming at you in the best way possible. So there are a couple of games that you can try with yourself, or one game and one practice. If you're interested in developing your gifts, or even if you don't want to develop your gifts, you just want to understand a little bit better of what's going on, you can try one or two of these exercises. Oh, yes, flew off the door. Naida, that's beautiful. I'm so glad to hear that. And bless you for acknowledging that. I am so, so proud of you. I love it when people acknowledge the experiences they're having. Thank you for that share. That is beautiful. Okay. One is called the body test. I learned this from Lee Harris. Lee Harris is an energetic healer and channeler at the beginning of this year when COVID had started to hit. Hey, Nick, thanks for joining. But I learned this from him. It's called the body test. And so this is a very simple test. It's similar to what I had mentioned earlier. If you have two choices that you're trying to make, and you can even practice this with like oranges and apples, right? Let's say that you're trying to decide which piece of fruit that you want to eat. You can sit there and just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and then concentrate on the orange and ask yourself, how does orange sound to me? And then just notice the impressions in your body. And if you just take a moment and just feel how the option of orange sits with your body. And I'd say about 30 or 60 seconds, just focus on it. And again, for anyone who is not practiced in meditation, this might be a bit of a challenge. So just work up to it, right? Maybe you sit with it for 10 seconds, but know that it's just practice. And so after you're done with orange, then ask yourself, well, what about apple? How does apple feel with me? And immediately you should feel one was lighter than the other. Either it's lighter or it feels better. Or yeah, Scotty, you might understand, you might know that it's neither one of those. It's another choice. You could do this with 3 different choices. I've done it up to 3 different choices before, but if you're just starting, maybe limit it to 2. But one of those choices will feel better than the other. That is your psychic ability, your body, your intuitive body telling you which one you would prefer, which is better. The second exercise that you can try is that channel journaling that I talked about earlier. The channel journaling, the way that works is you can just get a piece of paper and your pen, and at the top, just write, what does my soul want me to know today? And this is another tip. This is another trick that I had been doing it. I didn't realize it, but you can do it more intentionally. I also learned from Lee. What does my soul want me to know today? And immediately as the messages come in, just write them down. And again, I don't care if it's random words like dandelion, elephant, fan, just keep with it, because eventually it will become like a conscious stream. So when I first started doing like intentional channel journaling, the first phrase that would always come up for me is about love. It would just be love, and then be love. And then all of a sudden it would like always be love. You are love. You're an embodiment of love. But when we first start practicing it again, that's kind of like the biggest message that our loved ones want to get through, because it's so important for us to remember. It's not that we never knew it. It's just here on earth in this very dense, negative, energetic field. It's hard to remember sometimes. So that's the first thing they want us to remember. And then as we get more practiced, the messages will be a little bit more substantial. I got you all on fruit. You're all so pretty. I love you. So those are a couple of ways that we can be a little bit more in tune. Anytime that we have an experience, just understanding what we're feeling in our body and any impressions that we get. And we can also try things like the body test and channel journaling to get more in-depth messages from our higher self and our guides. So if you guys end up trying any of these, let me know, message me. I don't know if you put it in the comments here that I'll actually get it. I don't think that I always get notified, but if you do try sharing it with me. I'd love to hear how it goes. You can contact me on Facebook at Devin Evans Psychic Medium, or you can contact me on Instagram at Divine E Medium. That's spelled Devin E Medium. And then I'm also at devinevans.com. You guys are going off on food. But I hope you enjoyed tonight's show, and all of the information that I know there was a lot there, but hopefully it gave you some things to think about. And you ever want to share those with me, I'm totally up for it. I love hearing how people are starting to acknowledge the things that happen to you. Thank you, Nida. I love you so much. I love you guys. Thank you, everyone. Just a couple of quick announcements. I want to ask you guys to do me a favor. We have two YouTube groups or two YouTube channels that we're trying to promote. Shadow Hunters has a YouTube channel that's only a few subscribers away from hitting 1,000 subscribers. And that's a huge deal in YouTube. That would allow us to do a lot more. Similarly, we just started a Psychics Unite YouTube channel, and we just need to get to 100 before we can start doing some new things with that channel too and start building it up. So if you haven't yet, if you would please go out and subscribe to both of those. And if you feel so inclined, if you could share that out, it would really help support us as a group in our shows and be able to present and help you guys out. Speaking of Psychics Unite, I know that Scotty's mentioned it before, but Psychics Unite is a fantastic organization that has chapters across the Midwest, and we're growing. And so the beautiful thing about Psychics Unite is you don't actually have to be a psychic, or you don't have to admit that you're a psychic. Even if you're just curious, we're an amazing family and support group. And every Monday night right now, we're having an all chapter meeting over Zoom. So I will on my business page in Devin Evans Psychic Medium. I'll post the links to both of the YouTube channels, as well as the Psychic Unite Facebook group, where we post the announcements for the Monday night meetings. We would love to see you there. Let me know if you have any questions about that or how to set up Zoom, and we'll get you all set up. One more announcement. Tomorrow night, please return here to see Greg Koss and the Shadow Hour. He is going to have Dale Kazimierek, who is the founder of the Ghost Research Society, on his show. Dale is an author, a para-teacher, and has been one of Greg's professional mentors in his 40 years field of Ghost Research Society. So that's bound to be an amazing show. I love investigations and paranormal research. I'm getting into my own investigations with an Ohio chapter of Shadows Hunters. So as 2021 comes along and we turn into the new year, we'll have more stories about our investigations there. All right. It's time for me to say goodnight, everyone. Thank you so much for the love and support. I wish you well. Stay safe and healthy, and hopefully I'll see you back here next week, same time, same place, to get your weekly dose of truth bombs. Good night, everyone.